Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. This is lesson 3 as we continue to go through Surah Al-Fatihah, and we've covered so far itmam al-harakat. We've also covered the letters that are pronounced from this area, al-jawf, and we've also covered the letters that are pronounced from the throat, huroof al-khalq. And now as we move from the bottom upwards towards the front of the mouth in terms of makhaarij al-huroof, or the points of articulation of all the letters, we're now going to just work ourselves forwards towards the front of the mouth with the letters that are pronounced from different areas. So today we're looking at the back of the tongue, which is called aqsa al-lisan. Aqsa, the furthest part of the lisan. Wasat al-lisan, the middle of the tongue. And hafatul lisan or hafatay lisan, the edges of the tongue, and looking at which letters are pronounced from there, and breaking that down again, looking at Surah Al-Fatihah, and again looking at where we can implement the rules that we've covered into the recitation of the Qur'an. So let's investigate the letters of the back of the tongue, the middle of the tongue, and the sides of the tongue, and see what's pronounced from there, and see what we can implement into our recitation of Surah Al-Fatihah. So from the back of the tongue we have two letters that are pronounced, the qaf and the kaf. The qaf and the kaf. And it makes it easier now because we are working from the back, or we're working essentially from the chest to the front of the mouth. It's now easier to explain certain elements in terms of tajweed. So if you imagine that this is your tongue, and then we're going to pronounce the qaf is the furthest part of your tongue at the back going up, and saying qaf, and that's how you identify what it is, qaf. But right at the back of the tongue going up, you qa, 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 qaf. And then right next to it is the kaf. And the distinguishing factor between these two sounds is the fact that qaf is right from the back of the tongue, and then the kaf is just a little bit more forward and coming more to the front of the mouth from where we were already. So the furthest part of the tongue, if this is, you imagine this tongue, and hopefully there's diagrams that are up next to me to explain this, but the qaf right from the back of the tongue, qa, qa, and then just coming a little bit more forward from maybe where you get kaf. And again, the same rule or the same thing in order to practice. You just put a fatha before the letter, say aq, qa, 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 and ak, and you should be able to tell, if you're doing it correctly, that actually the first sound is right at the back of the tongue, aq, and the next one is from the middle of the tongue, or a little bit more closer to the front of the mouth, ak, ak. And so these are the two letters that pronounce from right at the back of the tongue. And we'll look at how we implement that into Surah Al-Fatihah just in a couple of minutes. Then we have the middle of the tongue. In the middle of the tongue you have three letters, aj, jim, ash, the sheen, and the ya. And not to get confused with the ya that we said is preceded by a kasra, which is pronounced from al-jawf. So ya, aj, ay, ash, all from the middle of the tongue. Aj, iya, like we've done before, ya, aj, and ash. And so aj, ash, ay, all from the middle of the tongue. Hopefully you can identify when you're doing that, and then putting a fatha before the letters in order to see where they're pronounced from. So these are again qaf and kaf, back of the tongue, or back of the throat, or back of the tongue, not the throat, back of the tongue. Then we have the middle of the tongue, where we have jim, sheen, and ya. And then we've got two letters apart from that are pronounced from the sides of the tongue, or the edges of the tongue. Now the edge of the tongue is this part that you have that covers an edge all the way around the tongue. And we have one letter that can be pronounced from either using the right edge, it can be pronounced by using the left edge as well. and it can be pronounced by using both edges together, and that's the letter Dod. Now the theory behind pronouncing the letter Dod is that the side or the edge of the tongue, are we talking about an area that can cover the teeth? So the edge of the tongue touches all the teeth at the top of the jaw until you get to your canine tooth. I think it's called the canine, which is the sharp tooth. Right? So you're making contact with the teeth at the back of the upper jaw, and they're touching all the way for the Dod until you get to that sharp tooth in your mouth. Bo, bo, and there's no puffing of the cheeks when that happens. Bod. Now I can do that on the right hand side where the edge of the tongue is touching all these until I get to the sharp tooth there. Bod. Or I can do it from this side. Bo, 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 covering again the edge all the way to that. Don't worry what's happening with the rest of the tongue. Right? You need to be more concentrated about the edge of the tongue from the backhand side, making contact with the upper jaw and all the teeth until you get to that sharp tooth. Or you can use both of them at the same time. And you get the same sound. So that's the edge of the tongue, touching the top jaw, and then making contact with the eye, all the teeth from wisdom tooth if you've got one, all the way to the sharp tooth here. And then you've got Dod. Allah, Allah, Allah. You get the same sound all together. And then from this point, you've got the canine teeth here. You got the rest of this edge of the tongue. So if you pronounce the Dod up to this point, which is where you had the sharp tooth, then from that area till the tip of your, or the end of your tongue, is another edge. So another edge, and that edge that is left is the edge that goes up in the mouth and touches the gums from all that area that's supposed to touch the gums, and that's the area we get the letter lam from. Al, and it's not the tip of the tongue that's used to pronounce the lam, right? And that's again a mistake that many people make. Al, that edge there goes up, al, and that is what has the pronunciation, or we get the correct pronunciation of the lam when that goes up. Al. And so again, recapping again, back of the tongue, qaf, kaf, middle of the tongue, jim, ya, and sheen. Then we've got the edge of the tongue, the back edge until you get to the sharp tooth there is used to pronounce the letter Dod on either side or both. Ba, ba, ba. And then from that point onwards, from the sharp tooth until the front of the mouth, that edge needs to go up in the mouth and touch the gums in order to get the letter lam. Al. So that's the theory behind it. So now again, let's look into Surah Al-Fatihah and see what we can implement, or where we can implement these rules in order to prove our recitation of Surah Al-Fatihah and the letters that are pronounced from the tongue also. Jazakumullah khairan. So we've looked at the letters that are pronounced from the tongue, back of the tongue, middle of the tongue, sides of the tongue. So let's go through Surah Al-Fatihah slowly and break it down again and see what we can implement in terms of what we've covered so far. Focus is itmam al-harakat, the focus is al-jawf, the focus again, throat, and the main focus today again is the letters that we've just covered that are pronounced from the back of the tongue, middle of the tongue, and the edges of the tongue. So let's go through it again. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. We've already covered the hamza from the bottom of the throat. Ayn from the middle of the throat. أعوذ بالله من the shin. Minash. Your lips are going back, and you're pronouncing the sheen from the middle of the tongue. Minash. And it has this characteristic of spreading the sound of the sheen in the mouth. So you get a very minash. like it's running through the teeth, the sound of this sheen. من الشيطان الرجيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Just concentrating again on the letters that are coming from the back of the tongue, middle of the tongue, and the edges of the tongue. That is the main focus today. So when we said A'udhu billah, billah, we got the lam. So we need to make sure that this area here, the edge is what's touching. The edge is what's touching and not the tip. A'udhu billahi, billahi. So the lam is the edge that touches the gums that are going up. A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. The jeen again from the middle of the tongue. Jeen. Bismillah. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Again, going through it, ba, and then b, again the mouth movements being very important. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And we continue, I don't think there's that much there in terms of using the letters that we've just covered. Then you have alhamdu, again the bottom of the throat. Now we have the lam, and using the edge to pronounce the lam, not any tip. If you're using the tip and you say al, some people pronounce it from the bottom of their tongue, or the bottom tip of the tongue, and you have essentially the same sound that's created. You say al. Now, what the issue here is, when we're pronouncing from the edge of the tongue, and I mentioned this in the previous lesson, we need to linger on the lam ever so slightly, and that lingering of the tongue and making the slightly elongated sound of the lam, especially when it has a sukoon in it, can only happen when it's pronounced correctly from the edge. So you say al, and when you've got al, automatically lam you should feel is moving towards the front of the mouth automatically. Al, and it's a forward movement. Anyone that's pronouncing the lam from the tip of the tongue, al, you've got a backward motion which doesn't happen when you pronounce a letter lam, or shouldn't happen. Al, so alhamdulillah, lillah, again 2 lams pronounced from the edge. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil, again the lam again, Rabbil Alameen. Lots of lams in that first opening verse, mashallah. So make sure that you are constantly aware of where you're pronouncing it from. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki li. Again, you got the lam with the edge and a kasra. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Here we have obviously the ya with a shadda on it. It's pronounced from the middle of the tongue. We have the hamza, which we've done already before, bottom of the throat, followed by the middle of the tongue. Because you've got a shadda means that little W that you see on top of the ya, 2 yas that you're pronouncing. So you say iya, and then opening of the mouth. See, all these things need to come together, and that's why the theory is important, in order to know how to improve the recitation. Where the letter pronounced from, what am I doing, when is the mouth opening, what's expected from me. I find it difficult for people to improve the recitation of tajweed without knowing what's expected, or what to do in order to improve. Iya, Iya, again, bottom of the throat, middle of the tongue, stress in the middle of the tongue, then opening of the mouth, and then you have the ka. Iyaka, ka. And so it's not the one that's right at the back of the tongue, qa. No, it's the one that's coming just in front of there as we move towards the front of the mouth. And you should have a little burst of air. If you have it, don't worry. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. And in the previous verse as well, maliki. SubhanAllah, we didn't even go through it. Maliki. So the kaf is in that verse as well. Maliki. Ki, not ki. Maliki yawmiddin. Then iyaka. A little burst of air, which we'll cover again later. But if you don't have it, don't worry too much. The thing that you need to make sure is that it's being pronounced from the back of the tongue, but not as back as the qaf. Iyaka na'budu, Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'in. In order to make sure that you pronounce everything correctly, you need to make sure that you know that the ya is pronounced from the middle of the tongue. You need to have stress on it because you know that there's two yas being pronounced because there's shadda there. You need to have the mouth movements working as well. I need to know where the kaf is pronounced from to make sure that it doesn't sound like a qaf. And you have a little burst of air. These things eventually become second nature, but you don't need to think about them with enough practice. Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'in. Iyaka ka. Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'in. Next verse. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. And then here we have the main thing, which is the qaf. And a lot of people, similar to what we mentioned in the last lesson, they seem to want to or drag the sound of the qaf and make it sound heavier than what it should be. The letters do have different scales, and when it's got a kasra on it, it's one of the lower scales within the letter itself. Hopefully that doesn't complicate matters to you. Essentially, I'll recite something in order for you to be able to tell the difference. So, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, which you might have heard a lot of people trying to really focus on the qaf. It sounds out of place, a lot of stress placed on it. That's not the scale that's required for the qaf here. It's a lower, lighter scale where it doesn't sound out of recitation, and it doesn't sound like you're stressing on it too much. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب. Here we have in this verse, last verse, we have two lords. Maghdu. So we've already said that that's the edge of the tongue that's touching all the teeth from the wisdom tooth, if you have one, on your back tooth, all the way to the sharp tooth, the canine tooth, all the way. So you've got ba. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ, and it's accompanied by the lips going forward. مَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. And again you have another dad, and this time it's accompanied by the opening up of the mouth, because we need to do that in order to get the correct sound with itmam al-harakat. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Ameen. And a lot of people, again, when they have the dad, there seems to be a puffing of the cheek. That doesn't exist when we pronounce the dad. It needs to be making contact with the correct teeth, which is the back tooth to the canine tooth, from either the left side or the right side or both together, and no puffing of the cheek. This is a pure sound. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Dad followed by the lam. Al-leen, again, the edge of the tongue, pronouncing by touching the gums that are up above the edge of the tongue at the front from the canine tooth forward. Al-leen. And that, inshallah, completes looking through Surah Al-Fatihah with the focus of the letters that are pronounced from the back of the tongue, the middle of the tongue, the edges of the tongue, front and back, where you have the dad and the lam. And that leaves us with to going through the letters that are pronounced from the tip of the tongue, and then letters that are pronounced from the mouth, then the nasal passage, and then a few tips, extra tips of when reciting Surah Al-Fatihah, what to look out for in order to make sure that the recitation is correct. So we're about halfway point through of the sequence, and inshallah I hope that you're finding that the videos are beneficial and they've helped you improve your recitation of Surah Al-Fatihah thus far. I'm now going to recite Surah Al-Fatihah again. Again, the focus now so far is itmam al-harakat, the openness of al-jawf, this area. We have alif preceded by a fatha, waw preceded by a dhamma, ya preceded by a kasra. Then we have the letters of the throat, hamza, ha, ayn, ha, ghayn, kha. Then we have the back of the throat, we've done qaf and kaf, and then we have jim, sheen and ya from the middle, and we have dad, and we have then the lam, all of which we've covered so far, and hopefully things that you can pick up and improve on in your recitation. So let's recite Surah Al-Fatihah one more time, and then again I'll leave you with Sheikh Anas, Sheikh Ayman, Sheikh Abdullah Basfar, and if your ears are tuned, hopefully you're picking up all the things that we are talking about in our lessons. طيب. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. Just a small point to remember as I was reciting there. The dad at the end of Surah Al-Fatihah has a shadda on it, so we're reciting two dads. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. So the first one we kind of make contact with where we're pronouncing the dad from, and then the second one we have the opening of the mouth accompanied with the dad. وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. And make sure that we're pronouncing two dads. Jazakumullah khairan.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم.